Let us hear the words from this ancient text of Genesis. Jacob left Beersheba and went to Haran. He came to a certain place and camped for the night, since the sun had set. He took one of the stones there, set it under his head, and lay down to sleep. And he dreamed. A stairway was set on the ground, and it reached all the way to the sky. Angels of God were going up and going down on it. Then God was right before him, saying, I am God, God of Abraham your father, and God of Isaac. I'm giving the ground on which you are sleeping to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will be as the dust of the earth. They'll stretch from west to east and from south to north. All the families of the earth will bless themselves in you and your descendants. Yes, I'll stay with you. I'll protect you wherever you go, and I'll bring you back to this very ground. I'll stick with you until I've been and done everything I promised you. Jacob woke up from his sleep. He said, God is in this place, truly, and I didn't even know it. He was terrified. He whispered in awe, incredible, wonderful, holy. This is God's house. This is the gate of heaven. Jacob was up first thing in the morning. He took the stone he had used for his pillow, and he stood it up as a memorial pillar and poured oil over it. He christened the place Bethel, meaning God's house. May you hear the message of this text in this time and in this place.
Hi, everyone. I am sitting here in the sanctuary of Mayflower Congregational Church. I wanted to come in here because this is a sacred place. And I've been thinking a lot about sacred spaces this week. You see, in 2006, I had the opportunity to travel to England. My father-in-law had immigrated to the United States from England, so we went to England to visit his side of the family. His nephew took us to the city of Liverpool to marvel at the city's cathedrals. I think he planned this tour of Liverpool because he knew I was a minister and would appreciate the opportunity to enter these sacred buildings. But he also wanted to go because he is an architect and admired the beautiful architecture of these buildings. So when you go to Liverpool, on one side of town, you will find the Liverpool Cathedral. This is a cathedral of the Anglican Church. This church is Britain's largest cathedral and the 5th largest cathedral in Europe. It is a massive structure with long spires pointing up towards the sky, beautiful rectangular stained glass windows. As we approached the church, I was struck by all the sharp angles in its architecture. And when we entered the sanctuary, I noticed that the main worship space was one long, large rectangular space. So on the other side of town, a straight shot from the same road, is a large Catholic church, the Metropolitan Cathedral of Christ the King. These two churches are almost like bookends on each side of town. The Metropolitan Cathedral of Christ the King is a huge contrast to the Anglican Church because it is round and has soft edges. When you go inside the cathedral, this cathedral, you will see that the walls are round and oval, and there are rounded pews to match. The contrast between these two cathedrals is so significant, and I marveled that how these two different types of architecture and space could both convey a sense of sacredness for us. Human beings, since the beginning of time, have sought to create sacred spaces. So, what makes a place sacred? This question has been on my mind from the reading of the story of Jacob's ladder in the book of Genesis. Jacob has left his hometown and is traveling to Haran. He has left his home because he has cheated and stolen his father's deathbed blessing from his brother Esau. This is actually the second time Jacob has stolen from Esau, and Esau is so angered by this that he vows that once the time of mourning for his father's death is over, that he is going to kill Jacob. So Rebekah, who is Esau and Jacob's mother, upon learning of this death threat, sends Jacob off to see his uncle Laban in another part of the world under the pretense of finding him a good wife. So in essence, Jacob has been exiled from his home. And in exile, he's facing an uncertain future, but he stops to rest for a night. He lays a stone under his head and falls asleep, and he dreams of a ladder that spires up to heaven from earth, with God's angels ascending and descending from this ladder. And while Jacob watches this ladder, God stands right next to him to offer him the same blessing that God provided to Jacob's father and grandfather. It is a promise of land and of generations to follow Jacob, but it's also a promise of relationship. God says to Jacob, "Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go." When Jacob awakes from this dream, he's astonished by this revelation and exclaims, "Surely God is in this place." So Jacob is traveling on unfamiliar territory and discovers God's presence and promise in a time of change and transition. As we live in this pandemic, we're also living in unfamiliar territory. The future is unclear, and we've had to adjust very quickly to a new normal. And so many things are in limbo. How are our children and teachers going to be able to attend school in a manner that's safe for everyone? Will we ever be able to play sports or watch a sporting event again? Will we ever be able to go to concerts to hear inspiring music or to see plays and movies in the theater? Will we be able to gather safely with our friends and family? Will we be able to go out to eat again without wondering if we are putting our own health at our risk? And how many businesses are going to survive this economic downturn? And how are we as a nation going to address these issues of and how are we going to take care of people who are the most vulnerable in our society? There's so many uncertainties right now. And there's uncertainties connected to our church. As a church, we wonder if we'll ever be able to hold adult education forums and classes in our building again. We're wondering when and if to take care of issues that have come up with our building, even when we're not even using it. And one of the most significant uncertainties we're experiencing as a congregation is, when will we be able to worship together again in our sanctuary? For so many of us, there are a lot of beautiful and amazing memories inside our church. There are memories of baptisms and weddings, memories of meaningful memorial services. We have created and maintained significant friendships and relationships in our church. We have been touched by the sacred in our worship services and inspired to give back to others. And even while we love our sanctuaries, we know that a church building does not contain God. Holly Heerden, Emerita Professor at Christian Theological Seminary, writes, God is not associated ultimately with a place, but in a relationship and promise. Each week as I prepare for these sermons, I read blogs and papers from people who are writing that this pandemic is an opportunity for all of us to come to an understanding that church is not just about what goes on inside a building. This pandemic has also helped me know that even in social isolation, I can have a deep and abiding relationship with God. Psalm 139 that you heard earlier reminds us of that, where it says, if I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me. Hold on to those words. Read Psalm 139 again this week. The Bible is full of stories and statements that remind us of God's steadfast love and compassion. And so, since we can't worship inside our building right now, we have to ask ourselves, where are we going to find the sacred? Where are the places right now where you can stop and notice God's presence and, like Jacob, proclaim, surely God is in this place? Having said that, though, I think social isolation is wearing on all of us. And while seeing friends and family and fellow congregants on Zoom is great, there's something missing about that. There is no opportunity to send and receive energy from each other. And it isn't easy to create a sense of deep connection when we can't touch each other and when we can't be in each other's presence. And while spirituality might be great for an individual endeavor, church is all about human relationships. I have come to really appreciate our deep connections with each other as a congregation. And I'm trying to think of creative ways to stay connected to you and for all of us to stay connected to each other. So I encourage you, send each other cards. Pick up the telephone and just give each other a call for no purpose except just to say, hey, how you doing? Take your church directory and look at all the beautiful pictures of the people in that directory and say a prayer for those people. In the days ahead, several of us will be getting together to think of some creative and safe ways for us to be together with masks on and with social distancing. We're going to have to get creative. If you have any creative ideas you want to share, let me know. And in the meantime, please don't hesitate to call me. I'm happy to talk on the phone, to arrange a Zoom chat, or come by and be with you outside with a mask and social distancing. We need each other now more than ever. Help us, O God, to find your abiding presence within us, and help us, O God, to be your abiding presence for each other in these times. Amen and amen.